Me being a planner and having nothing on the calendar and being anxious about, I need something to work towards. Like, I need a goal to get back in shape. A marathon might be too much because I couldn't even fathom running that distance because I didn't know how I was going to feel after having a baby. And, a half marathon is doable.
Women's running. Women's running stories.
Hi, I'm Nicole Pinto, and I'm back to talk about part two, postpartum running. I am now a mother. If you listened to part one, that was my journey to Boston while pregnant. So I'm back to give you part two.
Yes, Nicole is back. We have actually had her on the show several times. She was part of our Roads to Boston series. And then, yes, we did tell a part one story about her journey training for and running the Boston Marathon while pregnant. And I wanted to have her back to find out how her postpartum journey went. Before we get into that, though, welcome to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am your host and producer. And the music you hear behind me is made by Cormac O'Regan. He does all the original music and he scores the show. And this podcast is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. And now let's move on to Nicole Pinto's story. A few things to know. Nicole works as a cardiovascular perfusionist. And if you don't know what that means, just know that it means that she works very long hours in the hospital and her job is very intense. And to give you a little bit of a timeline, her daughter was born in February of 2022. Just before her daughter was born, she did sign up for the Malibu Half Marathon, which took place on November 6th of 2022. So yes, she had some very long-range goals. And one small detail I wanted to define is that Nicole does, along the way here, mention relaxin. And relaxin is a hormone that women who are pregnant and going to give birth experience. It relaxes muscles, joints, and ligaments, which makes it easier to have a baby. But from a movement standpoint, it also can make it easier to get hurt because things are just looser. And so she does mention that along the way. So just a heads up if you do not know what relaxin is. And without further ado, let's get on with it. Let's get to Nicole's story. She does start out telling us about how her pregnancy went. She tells her whole story in her own voice, so you will not hear from me until the end. So let's get to it. Here is Nicole.
I've been super lucky. I had a smooth pregnancy. I didn't have any morning sickness. I didn't have any ailments. So that allowed me to continue running as long as I did. I ran up to a week before I delivered. So I had my baby girl and my delivery was super smooth, but it's surprising. She was born 3 weeks early. I went for my 36-week appointment. It was towards the end of that week. I was almost 37 weeks for a standard scan. And up until this point, my pregnancy was flawless. I felt great. My numbers were great. What they noticed was that on the ultrasound, there was decreased fetal growth just due to space. And also my placenta had aged. So basically that just means that it was functioning, but not as optimally as it should have been at that point in my pregnancy. And so because I was due in 3 weeks and she would have been full term in 2 days, they decided that it would probably be in our best interest to go ahead and induce early. So as you can imagine, my husband and I were at the OB's office and hearing that, and it's like, I had every intention on going into the hospital to work, but I didn't think I would be going in to be induced that day. So it was quite the surprise. And all in all, it was super smooth and no issues, no complications. That compared to a marathon, it was, I think, 40 minutes and I had a baby, all in all, when it came time to push and everything. So that was that. We got home with her and learned very quickly that we weren't going to be sleeping very much, which we knew initially, but what you don't expect is the difficulty being tired, having difficulty communicating, with your partner and, navigating shifts and how to manage. And so it was exhausting. We were in awe and just super happy and in love with this little girl, but at the same time, really just trying to get through each day and each night, with the feedings and the changings and everything. After about a month, I felt like, okay, I've got a system. We've got a system down. We would do shifts where um, I would, sleep for like a 4 hour stretch at night. My husband would feed in the middle. I was pumping also. So we had bottles for her. And then during the day, he would sleep and I would nurse her and take care of her. And, it got better as time went on. And the first month after giving birth, I was just a hermit. So there was no running. And, I have a treadmill at home and I would walk a lot on the treadmill. I'd have the baby in her little bouncer napping and I would just walk just to get, some distance on my legs because that's really all I was, cleared to do at the time, just to let everything heal as it should. And before I could run, I will say that I did cross train. I did a lot of like yoga and postpartum workouts. And a little bit of like light weights because that's all I could do. Um, I also was sent some information on postpartum running. I remember one of the girls, she's a physician who I used to work with, sent me an article about, you shouldn't run until 12 weeks postpartum. And, that may be the case for people who don't typically run. That probably is a really good recommendation, but I also know that I've been running for a long time and in my mind I was like set on 6 weeks. If I'm good at 6 weeks, I'm going to walk run, and if anything, like if there's a twinge or any sort of pain, I would not have continued running. Then there was a little bit of the unsolicited advice and it's like, "Oh yeah, that's nice." And then the running group that I run with on Saturdays, it's a marathon training group. So, throughout the year, they just do long runs throughout the weekend. Most of the women are mothers. So I had them to talk to. Most of which ran while pregnant, before, after. And so I got a lot of good advice from them as well. So even more fuel to me believing that, okay, I'll take all this in and then, acknowledge where I'm at and go from there. Right around the 6.5 week mark, I was cleared to start running. I felt good. I did light jogs, like a walk run. And then one day I went out to do 1 mile, and that 1 mile felt like 10 miles. So it was probably around the 7th week mark where I went out into my neighborhood and, went out half a mile and came back. And, my heart rate was high. It felt really hard. I remember the sensation, and this sensation is reoccurring anytime I'm out of shape. This is like significantly out of shape, where it feels like my legs are itching. And what I've learned is that that's just the response to the brain when you have new capillaries opening to deliver blood to your tissues that have apparently atrophied over time, or you just haven't used those muscles yet. And so that's the body's way of delivering more oxygen to those tissues to allow you to continue at that rate. And so I dealt with that for at least a week. I remember posting on one of my Strava runs, walks, jogs, whatever you want to call it, one day, that I felt like a robotic sloth. That's how I felt. I felt like it didn't feel like natural running. It just felt kind of awkward. And the effort that I felt I was doing, felt faster than what I was actually doing. And so I definitely did not feel like myself. It didn't feel like my body. And I wasn't really bothered by that because I just knew this was just going to be part of the process. And the fact that I was out there running and everything else was okay and I wasn't having any pain or anything, I was just like, I'm just going to take it easy. And, sometimes I'm like, is something bothering me? Because, I would expect at some point maybe something would, but I really do think that I did get into this very gradually out of fear that I could get hurt or, maybe, I'm really loose somewhere and I could pull something easily because you have the relaxin to deliver your child. And so that lingers for a period of time after you deliver, and you could more easily hurt something if you overextend yourself. And so that was always on the back of my mind. That did not happen. And I didn't push myself to try to find out if that was going to happen. I would say after about 3 or 4 weeks of, running 3 or so times a week, short distances, it was starting to feel more smooth and easier. But yeah, it never, not in the beginning, it just did not feel natural. It was work. It was a lot of work, and I had to consciously make an effort to check in on my form and, really evaluate how I was landing, my cadence, my heart rate, all of these things, which, it's a new experience. So yeah, it was very different. I remember I went back to work after 3 months, and the day before I started back on at work was Mother's Day. And they were doing this Mother's Day 5K run in a neighborhood close by, and I got to see my friends who I hadn't seen, and it just felt so good. And I ran, it's just a fun run. It wasn't an organized race or anything, but I ran it and I was super proud. And then we did like some burpees and other exercises afterwards. And, of course I could have been in better shape, but coming back, I was like, okay, this is a start. It feels good to be back out in the community and moving, and that was a huge accomplishment at that point. My progression was normal, slow, gradual, and my heart rate slowly trended down, which means I was becoming in better shape. So I just kind of went with that. I slowly started adding a little bit more distance, and I remember after about 3.5 months running, I would say, Tracksmith was holding a Twilight 5K on the track, which first one was in July because they did a repeat the next month. That is where I started many, many years ago in high school on the track. And I was like, okay, well, I knew a lot of people. Like the roster came out, and I was like, I know so many people running this. I should go out there, and so I signed up. And then, of course, as soon as I signed up, it's like, oh my God, how many laps is this? What am I even thinking? When I ran on the track, it was 100, 200 meters short. So we're running 12 and a half laps on a track now. But I felt comfortable. It was safe. I knew where I would be at all times. And I just kind of wanted to see where I was fitness wise, because nothing pushes me more than being in a race setting. And so I like that they set it up so that you put your goal time, and then they put you in a heat within like a 2 minute time frame of where you were. And I was like, oh, that's so great. I'm not going to get blown out by someone running 15-minute 5K. That would be a little rough. So I felt really good about that. And so I ran it and I surprised myself, and I was like, okay, so I can run a little fast. I mean, nowhere near a PR, but I ran faster than I thought that I would at that point. And so that was a huge confidence boost. They were the Tracksmith Twilight 5,000 meter races. So yeah, they did two, and basically they gave you like a PR patch if you ran faster the second time around. So that one, I felt a little bit more pressure. I was like, all right, well, I want to at least do better than I did the last time. which I should be able to. I incorporated a little bit more speed work. I actually went out and ran on the track some intervals a few times before that, just to, work on my leg turnover. And so I went out there. I want to say my goal was like 21 minutes, which I felt was reasonable for me at the time. And I had two of my friends running in the same heat, and my goal was just to try to stay with them. Now, I thought for sure they were going to take off and be gone, but I pushed every lap. I was like, all right, I only have this many laps left. I can do this. I'm okay. It's hard, but I'm okay. Nothing's hurting me. I'm working hard, as to be expected. And so by the end of that, I actually surprised myself and ran a minute faster than I anticipated. So I was like, all right, so I can move a little bit faster now. This is good progress. And so this was in August. So yeah, I still had about a month before I needed to start training for this half marathon, a month and a half or so.
Greetings from Evergreen Podcasts. We're rolling out a listener survey and we want to hear from you. The information in the survey will help us gather statistics and in turn make our shows more appealing to advertisers. I know most people don't like ads, but this is one of the only ways our shows make money and help keep their lights on. We promise it will only take a few minutes, but the impact on our podcasts will be tremendous. As a token of our appreciation, we'll randomly select one lucky participant each month to win an exclusive merchandise package from Evergreen Podcasts. Head to evergreenpodcast.com/listener survey to help a show and possibly get some free stuff for doing so. We can't thank you enough for the support. Now back to the show.
I wanted to do well in the half marathon, but it wasn't a priority to PR or anything like that. I just, wanted to feel strong, and I was feeling good. I was feeling like I got some good speed back, but I wasn't confident in the distance and being able to push pace for that length of distance since I hadn't run that far in so long. But, I wasn't following any training plan for the first time. I usually do, but having a baby and trying to find balance between work and, giving my husband a break because he spends the day with her when I'm working. He took the year off to care for her when I'm not here. I was super lenient and flexible with myself. If I was really tired with work or I just wanted to spend time with her without running and like one-on-one, I just wouldn't run. I probably ran about 5 days a week, which is atypical, but my priorities had changed. And when you have a kid, then you can make plans. That's all well and good, but you'll be disappointed a lot if you think you're going to get somewhere on time, do something you want to do at a certain time. And so it just didn't matter. I didn't really care. I feel like I've become more easygoing from that standpoint because, well, I just had a baby and, she is my focus. I want to spend time with her and do stuff with her. And I knew that if I was going to train seriously and follow a strict plan, that was going to take away from my time with her. And that's the last thing I wanted. So nothing really fazed me. If I didn't run one day, I would make it up another day. We had our routine in the mornings. I would, get up, I'd nurse her, change her, put her in a running stroller. We'd go to the bike path and we would go out for, 3 to 5 miles or so, come back and then play. She eats again. I mean, that was just part of the routine. And I will say that what I did learn is that, it's a different type of strength if you can run pushing a running stroller. It's just the gait changes. Your hands are up instead of side by side. So initially when I ran with her, like my back was hurting in my arms. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this. How are people doing this? That just went away. That was just a growing pain of my body adjusting to running with the stroller. So, um, and I realized that I needed to run without her to be able to run a race also. So then on the weekend, either when she was napping or early before she would wake up, is when I would start to do longer runs, um, by myself mainly because I didn't feel like I could go run with a group and be able to keep up. And I just needed to see where I was really at for that distance. I did try to run, definitely the long runs without her, and one other run during the week if I could, whether it be on the treadmill or outside, with a little bit of speed behind it, just because I needed to, keep that going. I didn't want to lose any speed and the mechanics. And, it was just kind of a hodgepodge, to be honest. I ended up towards the last month just having a goal of each week being somewhere between 28 and 30 miles. So that was, pretty much the extent of my training. I would say about 70% of training, I pushed her in her running stroller. Yeah, I felt like I was killing two birds with one stone, and I really, really loved being out there with her. I just, ran when I could and trained when I could, and that was that. Check each week off, and then eventually it would be race day. I will say this, I don't by any means try to downplay the challenges that come with being pregnant, delivering, or running postpartum. Everyone's journey is very different. I have several friends who have postpartum depression and anxiety. And, I think the one thing that I did struggle with is guilt, the guilt of going out to run without my baby. And so that's hard. I'm so attached to her. She's attached to me. And and being a working mother, you really want to make an effort and crave that time with your child. So that's the hardest part, at least from me, was when I would go out on these runs without her. It's like I'm out there and it's like I already want to go back home because I want to be with her. So all of those things are real and normal, and you work through it, and there's different ways to navigate, whether it be running before she wakes up, after, during her nap, etc. It's been easier, but that was the biggest challenge. I did not want to leave her, and it's like I need to get out and do this for me. This is healthy. I'm not going to be out that long, not running that far. All in all, it's all good now. And yeah, now I run at 4 in the morning. Nobody's up. So that's not a problem. So I did the half marathon. I had an A, B, and C goal, which I had decided 12 weeks out from the race. And they were all about 2 minutes apart from, my PR. So out from that, again, I had no intentions to PR or push myself too hard. I did not have a plan when I woke up that morning until I was on the way to the race for a pace to follow. And so one of my friends actually drove me to the race who was going to run and didn't. And so we were just talking about training and running, and I was like, I think today I'm going to shoot for this pace and try to maintain it. I didn't do the math. I don't even know what that would equate to, but it was just a pace that I thought I, could probably maintain. And yeah, I mean, that was the extent of it. It was a cold morning. This is in Malibu, so it was also a hilly course, which I clearly did not look at prior to signing up, because if I had, I don't know that I would have done it, just because it would have intimidated me so much being about to deliver and not knowing already like how I would be feeling to race. So I lined up in the line, and I was closer to the front because I didn't know what the paces were going to be, and I didn't want to get stuck behind anyone. I wanted to at least get out in a way and just settle into a rhythm. And so I'm watching my watch, and I'm hitting. So my goal was 7:20 pace, which I felt was reasonable. And yeah, the first few miles, I was there, and I was feeling pretty good, and I had calculated exactly where this hill was going to be. It was just the longest uphill stretch ever. And I was like, well, I'm going to be here for a while, so don't work too hard. And then at that point, I just went off of effort. Um, and it was like an out and back. So turning back is when I started to feel like, man, this is tough. I still have a few miles to go. So I just kept going and maintained. And I remember being at mile 11 and wishing the race was over. I was like, oh, I haven't worked this hard in a long time. And looking at the time, and I was like, I could probably hit my A goal. And then right around mile 12, I did the math, and it's like, I could actually PR this race, and it was just unbelievable because I was just in my own world. I didn't really have a plan. How is this even possible? I just, I kicked it into gear because the last 2 miles were downhill, and I was like, well, this is beneficial. I'll take advantage. And I remember some guy was running next to me, and we were just going like passing each other. We'd switch off, he'd pass me. And I was like, oh, this is helpful, because then it becomes fun. It's like, now come back here, Then you just kind of play mind games with yourself to get through it. And then I remember crossing the finish line. I was like, oh, I'm so glad that's over. But the time on my watch, it wasn't a PR. I don't even remember what exactly happened, but I didn't know until I checked the results. And not only was it a PR for me, which is insane, but I came in first in my age group. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't expect this at all. So, I mean, I have no words for that. And seeing how my training was and getting that result will make me do things differently in the future for sure, and how I train and prioritize things. Yeah, I actually was talking to some of the girls today on our long run about how crazy it is, or it was when I did the half, to have run the way I did on some random, I'll go out and run now for this long training, um, versus following a strict plan. And, comparing the results, I did better just running whenever, not following a plan. So, yes, that surprised me because I've been doing longer distance running for about 8 years, and I was always following a plan and expecting certain results. And yet I did achieve good results not doing any of that. So it's just kind of mind blowing that things worked out that way. But I think the biggest factor, at least for me, when it comes to training, is not so much the quantity anymore, but the quality, because time is not on your side like it used to be. So when I'm out there, I'm making sure that I'm not, just taking these runs for granted. I'm making the most of them because this is my opportunity. It's not like, oh, I'll just do it later. Like, there is no later. I've got mama duty, or I'm on call and I have to do this. And so I think the quality is significantly better and quantity is not as much of a factor, or it wasn't in this training. For the marathon, it has to be. Quantity does need to be there, but it won't be the same as it was in the past. I'm not going to be out there for hours every day and running a million miles. So it'll be more quality workouts, quality long runs, and just easy runs. And yeah, we'll see what happens with that, and this has definitely changed my perspective on training and running.
Nicole has already started taking that new perspective out into her training because she has signed up to do the Mountains to Beach Marathon, which will take place on May 20th. She reminded me that the last marathon that she trained for seriously was Chicago 2019. So it's been a while. COVID happened, then she got pregnant, and while she did run Boston, she did take it easy because she was pregnant, and now she's back. So good luck to Nicole on her spring marathon, and thank you to Nicole once again. As I mentioned, she has been on this show many times. She has been so generous with her time and her storytelling, and it's always such a pleasure to talk to her. So I'm just thrilled that she was willing to come on and share sort of the before, during, and after of this pregnancy marathon running journey. Of course, we know that everybody's journey is different, especially through a journey like pregnancy and postpartum running. But the more we get these stories out there and we share all the many different experiences that people have, the more equipped any one person is to navigate their own journey when they see what the various different possibilities or pitfalls might be. So thank you so much, Nicole. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. So that does it for us for this episode. Thank you so much for being here. I always say it because it's true. We love making these episodes, but the power of them lies in you listening and also in you sharing. I would love it if you would share this episode with somebody who you think would appreciate it. And please subscribe. And of course, I do not make this show by myself. As I mentioned at the top, Cormac O'Regan does all of the original music and he scores the show, and he does that from his studio in Cork, Ireland. April Mariner of Bonfire Collaborative does all of the graphics for the show, the website, the Instagram posts, the logo. She does it all, and you can find her at april@bonfirecollaborative.com. And yes, I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am your host and producer. I am once again coming to you from my home closet studio in Somerville, Massachusetts, and I do wish you healthy, joyful strides forward. Women's running. Women's running stories.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.